comments or questions, but please remember to keep it respectful. And I'd like to hand over to today's presenter. Asif, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Hello, everyone. And thanks for joining in this chat room. And thank you, MU and Impact, for this great opportunity to speak to most of the young people around the world. And this workshop is basically focusing on China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, and like a broader lens on the environmental justice questions. Bringing in the case in point, which is Tharparkar Coalfield, which is located in Sindh province. So as you can see my the title of this presentation, there's this map which shows like an ambitious program of connectivity. And from the right, you can see at number 4, we are going to focus on this area, which is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. And this title map basically is just to give you an idea that such is the scale of the broader project where China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is being hosted, being couched in. So the ambitious program that I'm referring to is One Belt, One Road initiative that has been started by China in 2015. Earlier, there were like policy hints from them that the Chinese government is going to start this project of regional connectivity, which basically is about connectivity, regional cooperation, and development. And by development, they mean infrastructure development, which the program, the Belt and Road Initiative, which is also called One Belt, One Road, which metamorphosed into different, and still it is evolving. And different shapes, various projects have been shelved, various projects have been brought in later. So it's like an evolving form of the infrastructure cooperation and regional connectivity. So it's basically, in its essence, it's basically having one land route which is centered around China's Xinjiang province, which is the landlocked province. And the other side is the revival of which is called 21st century Silk Road for the naval part. And that initially connects 64 countries in Asia, Europe, and Africa. The key objectives for this One Belt, One Road, or you may call it Belt and Road Initiative, which is like the famous name for it. That's the first objective, is to increase trade and investment, which includes policy communication, connectivity, trade facilitation, capital flows, and people-to-people exchanges. Second is to establish free trade zones. That's the pivotal lever of the project. That's going to be, those trade zones would be established all across this Belt and Road Initiative. And then the third one is enhancing financial cooperation in the region through investment in infrastructure, which is basically leveraging cooperation through their interagency cooperation, like Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, New Development Bank, and BRF Fund. So enhancing cooperation between the newly established financial institutions. Fourth one is to have access to natural resources. And that's where this presentation or this workshop is located. Fifth one is strengthening transport infrastructure, which includes expressways, waterways, airways, and other logistics. Just to these are the special purpose vehicles on which this program is going to sort of role. And then the last one is deepening cultural exchanges in the region, which includes education, science and technology, culture, sports, tourism, environmental protection, healthcare, etc. So minutely, it's divided into 6 corridors of economic development. The first one is that's called New Eurasia Land Bridge, which is railways to Europe, and that passes through Kazakhstan, Russia, Belarus, and Poland. And then there is China, Mongolia, Russia Economic Corridor, and this is like mix of railways and road. And then the third corridor is China, Central Asia, West Asia Economic Corridor, which links Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Iran, and Turkey. So we have also seen in the news that there's like a spike, a huge investment deal has been signed between the Iranian and the Chinese governments like a week ago, maybe 3-4 days ago, the $400 billion, which is like even overshadowed the already ongoing cooperation with Pakistan, which was like around $87 billion. So, but that's also sort of bringing in how the geopolitics on infrastructure is working in the region in South Asia and beyond. So that cooperation lies, the new sort of cooperation lies in this corridor. The third one, China, Central Asia, West Asia Economic Corridor. The fourth one is China, Indochina Peninsula Economic Corridor. Again, sort of because like there are controversies around this also, like the rise of China and how this is being skeptically seen around the world, in the West or even in the Asia, different countries. For example, Mahathir Mohamad, when he was the prime minister, he said that this is going to be new colonization. And he sort of tried to renegotiate with the Chinese government that those projects were too big for them to handle in a way. And so the key feature around this development is also a constant renegotiation among the actors as well. So fifth one is China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, and this basically is linking Xinjiang province and its Kashgar city with the Pakistani port of Gwadar, which is a deep sea port. And it's also, again, this is also full of controversies, full of sort of evolving geostrategic politics. And of course, the current, as I said earlier, that the current deal between Iran and China was centered around Chabahar port, which is around maybe 170 kilometers from this Gwadar port. So it's like developing a double facility in the region, which is like two big mega projects of ports so much close to each other, but again attached to all those suspicions, etc. The last one, as per the plan in the BRI project, China, Bangladesh, India, Myanmar Economic Corridor. But as we can understand that the relations between China and India would definitely influence the development of this corridor. So how this goes, we really don't know about that, but it's part of the bigger plan that China has rolled out. But then the focus of this presentation, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. This corridor basically connects southwestern China to Pakistani port of Gwadar, as I said earlier, on Arabian Sea. And it's like a significant offshoot of One Belt, One Road, or BRI project. And it's considered to be one of the first footprints of China-led globalization also. So many names to it, so many ambitions and hopes and suspicions attached to it. But as the China scholar Andrew Small said, that whatever happens to CPEC would determine the fate of BRI project in general around the world and in the region, especially in Asia or Africa. So this needs to be seen very carefully. The corridor is divided into 3 routes, which passes through all the provinces in Pakistan, starting from Gilgit-Baltistan to Balochistan. And this includes the motorways, expressways, railways, sea and airports, power generation plants, industrial zones, and agricultural zones. And then this ICT-enabled urban infrastructure as well, which is going to sort of strengthen the economic activity which has been planned. So after 5 years, it was announced in April 2015, and out of 122 projects that were part of the initial plan, 32 plans have already been completed. Hello?
Hello, you're fine, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, because there was, actually I thought there's some problem in. Just going back to the slide actually. I'm sorry for this. Can you guys see the slides?
Yes, we can see them.
Thank you so much. So out of 122 total projects that were planned, 32 have already been completed with the cost of $20 billion. Out of the total estimated investment of 67 billion. So it keeps on changing. As I said, there are so many projects which were part of the earlier plan have been shelved. And earlier it was thought to be sort of a portfolio of 87 billion, but then it was scaled down to 67 billion. It's the current, the size of the plan is 67 billion USDs. But this is very important to note here that Pakistani growth strategies and development discourse is centered around China-Pakistan economic cooperation on infrastructure for the next maybe 10, 15, 20 years. That's the takeaway. But then again, within that particularly, energy cooperation is pivotal. And that's due to increasing energy demand and current shortfalls, which is around 3,000 megawatts. Energy projects have been a top priority for this infrastructure cooperation. And it basically is probably like 60% of the CPEC funding. And out of that, if we further categorize them, 38% of the generation capacity is coal-based. 54% is hydro and 8% comes from wind and solar under the CPEC energy portfolios. And now coming to the Thar Coalfield, it's an open pit coal mining project which is situated in Thar Desert, Tharparkar districts of Sindh, which is around 400 kilometers northeast of Karachi. The coal reserves are estimated to be 175 billion tons, covering an area of more than 9,000 square kilometers, divided into like various blocks for exploration, whereas mining operations has begun on block 2 to produce 660 megawatts of coal power, initially to be increased to 3,300 megawatts in 2022. The Thar area, which is also the largest concentration of Hindu minority population in Pakistan, it's around more than 60%. It's a desert area, and this is considered to be one of the most poverty-stricken areas in the country. The local people are highly dependent on household livelihood related to natural resources. The main source of income is rain-fed agriculture, which is like the arid sources, and the livestock. As we all know that the climate change is bringing adverse impacts to the region already with the rise in temperatures. The main concern here is the resource depletion, the water. the droughts having negative impacts on the economic life of the region already. The community which was relying on subsoil water, which is extracted from the wells as deep as 50 to 90 meters, and other sources are private wells, public tube wells, underground storage tanks for rainwater. And more important is this fact that groundwater has been reported to be contaminated. So this project is known to be the third dream, as in the government sector or the private sector investing in that, or the companies working in their subsidiaries. They call it the third dream because of the abundance of the cheaper coal there. And it was since 1990s that the exploration or the feasibility studies of the project were going on, and people were really excited. The mining sector, the companies, the corporate entities were excited to explore this. And due to so many reasons, like the bureaucratic hurdles, lack of adequate finances, technical support, etc., this project kept on sort of being delayed. But through this CPEC cooperation, this came to the fore, and it was taken as an early harvest project, like the top priority projects. So, and it is because of this that the native desert communities have suffered project-induced migration due to compulsory land acquisitions, loss of livelihood and destruction of their agro-pastoral economies, biodiversity, and economic environmental resources, especially water, as I said. The argument, the central theme of this presentation is that in this case, the existing entrenched socioeconomic and structural inequalities under this all-encompassing sort of securitized development cooperation which is going on has weakened the collective action. It has strengthened the environmental blackmail among communities, and it has perpetuated the expandability and erasure of the local native communities, especially the minorities. So we are going to bring in a critical environmental justice framework to this debate to understand more about the project and its sort of dynamics. So generally, environmental justice is known to be fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people with respect to development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies, which guarantee the same degree of protection from environmental and health hazards, and equal access to decision-making process in order to have healthy environment to facilitate living, learning, and work. So it can also be said that this is a human right to have a healthy and safe environment, a fair share of natural resources, the right not to be suffered disproportionately from environmental policies, regulations, laws, and then to have a reasonable access to environmental information, along with fair opportunities to participate in environmental decision-making. So a number of definitions for the environmental justice thing, but predominantly environmental justice framework has been understood within the context of race and class in the US and maybe Canada or the West especially, as it was in around 1970s onwards, understood by the seminal work by Robert Bullard, Dumping in Dixie, which was about the waste, how the racial context or the class context of the waste management in the US was. And then it started developing and on those lines. Predominantly, the central concern was race and class. So recently, some of the scholars, they have gone beyond that, and they have suggested and stressed that newer analytical perspectives should be used. These frameworks call for analyzing ongoing environmental inequalities, struggles, and responses through multidimensional and interdisciplinary approaches, in order to provide more depth to the theoretical basis of environmental justice theory and practice. So critical environmental justice studies emphasize on 4 pillars to look at an environmental justice problem. The foremost is intersectionality, then is the multiscalarity, and then is the institutional perspective. And 4th one is indispensability and expendability sort of framework. So intersectionality stresses that many identities and social categories work together to produce advantages and disadvantages across bodies and spaces, and that inequalities do not act independently of one another. It's inclusive of class, contrary to what the traditional environmental justice framework suggested. It says that it is inclusive of class, gender, sexuality, immigration status, citizenship, age, ability, and other differences in social categories. And not only that, various social categories of differences work to play particular bodies at risk of exclusion, marginalization, erasure, discrimination, violence, and othering. So it's like the production of the inequalities and injustices and the suffering, both is intersectional. So like it does, the critical environmental justice framework says that there has to be a lens that look at them beyond race and class. The second constituent of the critical environmental justice framework says that we need to have multiscalar lenses and methodologies and approaches to understand complicated phenomena, causalities, and consequences in order to produce visible possible solutions. Third component of this framework looks at the community responses to the environmental injustice, strictly within the institutional framework. The third institutional framework maintains that injustices and inequalities are produced by state institutions because they formalize them through their policies, through their laws, through their glass ceilings, through their other organizational behavior and cultural practices. So there can be no approach outside that which can actually sort of holistically frame environmental injustices. The 4th pillar is to see that all the communities and groups are interlinked and indispensable for each other. It's not just the poor or the low income communities, but injustices for all is the same for others in terms of costs and impacts. No community can claim independence from an environmental hazard or vulnerability or risk. So how we look at Tharparkar in an intersectional way. While critical environmental justice includes multiple identities, social forces, classes, gender, sexualities, age groups, abilities, and other diversities, as agents to produce advantages and disadvantages with the environmental justice, one particular force is added through this case, in the case of Thar Power project. That's the international collaboration giving rise to local injustices, which is like also cuts across the other one, which is like the scalar approach. So you have this international collaboration on the top to produce local injustices at the very minute, at the very sort of local level. So it is pertinent to mention here that while China is reducing its coal power generation and usage in the country, it is promoting this source elsewhere, abroad. And Thar coal power is just one such example. So in this case, a thriving economy is promoting a source of energy which has the most of environmental hazards in the developing countries. Out of 10 mega energy projects of BRI, 8 are in Pakistan, and 5 out of those 8 are coal powered. This can be pointed out that Pakistan could say no to such a partnership. That's like an easy thing to say. The answer lies in the fact that the country had massive energy crunch in the recent past and the economy slowed down due to terrorism. And as an easy and cheap solution, this project was started by Pakistani government to scoop lignite and its hazards imposed on local poor population of Tharparkar. It is important to add another dimension to intersectionality of injustices is the fact that District Tharparkar, as I said earlier in the beginning, that it's the largest concentration of Hindu population. The power imbalance between the actors can be seen here, starting from the international stage where this cooperation on hazardous source was made, down to a site with a poor population of religious minorities, their families, women and children, all open to bear the cost. The second lens is multiscalarity. It's, as I said, that the first one cuts across this as well. So Thar Coalfield and political ecology of mining, it basically is, maybe it might not be a new story for the different developments in the global south. It is sort of interlinked to those, the patterns and behaviors that the development agencies produce and the governments behave in that manner. So it is, on the one hand, is connected with that, especially like there are so many active struggles in Latin America against the mining operations. The recent being the ouster of Bolivian President Evo Morales. So that was sort of, it is considered that it is directly linked to the mining of the rare metals. So in this case, in the countries of global south, where the respective governments compete with each other to relax regulatory framework, to invite foreign investment in different mining sectors. So it's ironic that this sort of global scale cooperation, there's a competition on that, and the governments show those figures of foreign direct investment with a sense of pride, and they use it in their election slogans to win the voters. And on the other hand, it draws similarities with the local and national scale responses and resistances through legal battles on such interventions by the foreign investors and national governments. As I said, active struggles in the Latin America and Southeast Asia. The community leaders in Tharparkar area have approached, they are using their means, whatever available to them, approached the High Court of the province to have a prohibitory injunction against their loss of land, livelihood, dumping of effluent in the open, and environmental degradation, even if the company is providing alternative housing, hospitals, pastures, and schools. More so, as the critical environmental justice theory suggests, the issue has been analyzed from multiple perspectives: environmental pollution, displacement, minority rights, alternative energy source. But here again, we see that the economic rationale is winning. It's probably the mindset that looks at the immediate exigencies instead of looking at problem holistically. So in view of the energy crisis in the country and availability of such a massive amount of cheaper resources, was prioritized on other considerations like environmental pollution, displacement, or the minority groups. So the third lens is institutional framework. So CEG's stress is that the struggles against the environmental injustices are integral to the institutions of state. You cannot separate them. You cannot separate the struggles from the institutional, the frameworks available to like rolled out for promoting such development, such infrastructure development. So therefore, any view that keeps them outside the status sphere would be flawed. The struggle of the people displaced or at risk of environmental impact in Thar Coalfield are also within the constitutional and legal framework. So the problem is manifold here. As I said, the land acquisition laws provide for compulsory acquisition for public purposes. And this is like the notorious Section 4 of the Land Acquisition Act 1894. This is a colonial law, which is the same in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. So public purpose, in air quotes, takes precedence over everything whenever the government wants that land and displaces its people. The Constitution of Pakistan also further provides for ownership of the state on minerals and other resources. So subsoil wealth of the communities, if discovered, goes to the state. So that's like a double kind of double-edged sword used against the communities. And again, as I said, that when we employ a multi-scalar lens to the problem, we see this across global South, where there's competition and sort of show off by the governments and leaders that look, we are bringing in foreign direct investment. So the community is the local community is arranging protests and approaching the courts, as I said, which is the fundamental right for seeking remedies on environmental injustices made to them through the coal power project. On the other hand, there are instances around the world where armed struggles started on such explorations and extractions. There's a localized armed struggle going on in Balochistan, which is known to everyone in the South Asia, and that is also connected to the larger resource conflict, the natural resource conflict, the mineral resources available in that otherwise impoverished province. So the fourth one is indispensability lens, and that basically implies that all the communities and groups are interlinked and indispensable for each other. Critical environmental justice asserts that socially, politically, philosophically, and ecologically, what this means is that we are all linked in webs of social interdependence, so that what happens to one group affects in some way all others. Injustices for one are the same for others in terms of their costs and impacts. If biodiversity of Tharparkar is being affected by the coal field, this is for the poor communities to defend only. The cause is common for everyone living in the area to ensure that environmental safeguards are properly fulfilled. The poor communities bear the brunt way more than the rich people, but in Tharparkar if Tharparkar becomes inhabitable, it would be for both the rich and poor equally, which is quite understandable. While in many cases the poor communities show resilience in adverse times, this should never be taken as if they are fine with the development and associated injustices and inequalities. So as conclusion, this presentation has attempted to highlight that various notions of justice demand a responsibility of state and society towards environmental changes that we are experiencing very clearly. This responsibility is basically that ethical compass which guides our actions and our behaviors. While we collectively are responsible to create environmental stress which cause those conditions of inequalities on the one hand, and on the other, we appear to be creating a second layer over that by throwing the hazards on vulnerable communities already trying to cope with those disasters. And since those hazards, toxicities, and calamities are intersectional, deeper down, this further distribution goes to the weaker most, the women and children. As the environmental justice questions are broadening their sphere through the prism of power imbalance, this interaction, this workshop, through a transnational energy infrastructure corporation, has attempted to show how economic exigencies are failing the ethical concerns and perpetuating environmental injustices. Thank you so much. If you guys have any questions regarding this, you're welcome.
If anybody has a question, would you like to raise your hand, please?
No questions?
Asif, there were lots of comments in the chat. I don't know if you want to have a look.
Oh, I can stop sharing my screen and then how does it work? Uh, what do I?
Okay,
Chat room.
on the bottom menu, you'll see that there's a chat function.
Oh, okay. Okay. I just sorry for that. So there's like a cross chat as well, and then there are questions that Pakistan is dependent on China to prevent another surgical strike between India and Pakistan, therefore highly require China support. Maybe true in that geostrategic politics, as I said, which is being translated through this infrastructure cooperation. But then again, attached to this is that definitely that defense cooperation. Analysts also comment on the usage of Gwadar port, which is the deep sea port, for military purpose, and they say that China is sort of pumping in a lot of money because it needs to control the Arabian Sea part of that part of the region. So you may say that, but then again, there's like, could you please outline the impact this corridor would have on Indian interests, says Dhruv. Indian interests, keeping in mind India-Pakistan in Indo-China relations. So as I said, that the 6th corridor, which is India, Bangladesh and China corridor, that is being critically, influenced by the relationship between India and China. And India and China are at loggerheads in Ladakh area. So if both the sides see that they can leverage their economic cooperation through infrastructure development, then this can obviously serve the Indian interests as well. Otherwise, going on the same hostile, path-dependent sort of, hostile policies, foreign policies, both the sides cannot, frankly, benefit from such cooperations. Okay, so then there is how effective really, Muhammad from UAE says, how effective really is boycotting towards any economy, perhaps local production, could be encouraged by total boycotting, puts many factors of diplomacy at risk, even with those you do not have the best diplomatic relations with. Yeah, that's right. And see, I mean, either you have this sense of cooperation when you start such programs like the regional cooperation on infrastructure, or you have those, as I said, path-dependent hostile policies. So what they say is the policy on isolationism, be it Pakistan or be it India, trying to sort of isolate each other through various global powers, would not work. You're right in that sense, that it's not effective. Going back to the very precise first part of your question, how effective really is boycotting towards any economy, that's not something to go about, if the regional cooperation is, and if you think that even EU is sort of very forthcoming on CPEC and other projects like the BRI, and they are sort of not convinced on the fact that we should look at Chinese ambitions as sort of, with suspicions. So the mindset basically counts. So let's value all opinion. Okay. There's a cross chat as well. And then there is, do you think CPEC can be helpful to Pakistani economy? Rumesa from UAE, or do you think it can open a bigger opportunities for Pakistan's smaller businesses? So that's, again, I see a problem here that, but then again, that's like a generic way of looking at mega developments in global South. that mega developments would create conditions that would be helpful for smaller businesses as well at the grassroots. But there are critics who say that no, it's basically favoring the big investors. So I see one very sort of the evidence is also available for that, and that's like the creation of wealth through real estate, local level, which is like for example, if there's a big motorway or going through otherwise a neglected district of a province. So then we see that around that there are service areas, there are small restaurants, motels, and other smaller sort of business clusters start to emerge. So in that way, yes, but then there are debates on that. That it either favors the big investors or sort of so there's this like bigger two camps available on that. And then there's like Visak says, let's all be diplomatic and refrain from bringing political that's a comment, that's not a question maybe. Could you please outline the impact this corridor would have on Indian interests, keeping in mind Pakistan? Again, that's probably the question you maybe repeated. I was not looking at the chat room. I thought, I hope I answered this sort of. Are you satisfied with that? I hope. Anyone who has a question? Okay, then Visak, could you please outline the impact this corridor? Again, the same question. Okay, some Ali says, Asif, are you a lecturer or professor? I'm a PhD student. Mohammed Fazan says, doesn't CPEC seem like British expanding their control in history, as many of the things like Chinese able to buy Pakistan land is being neglected by the government? Is that a matter to be focused more? So then the critiques of CPEC or BRI says that it's a debt trap diplomacy. So as we have seen the port in the case of port in Sri Lanka, so the investors, they took control of the port, and then they started operating that, and by that they have sort of deduced that for Pakistan as well, it's going to be the same sort of things. But just alternatively, if we look at China and the way it has sort of rolled out a massive amount of money, and it's not just confined to Asia, it's Africa, it's Europe as well. So China has also to carefully see that there are the interests that are to be catered for within the partner countries. So I don't think so. Yes, controls are there because lenders control a lot of policies, and then there are sovereignty questions attached to it that maybe the Chinese, the partners, the Pakistan, Bangladesh, or Sri Lanka or other partners, maybe they are ceding their sovereign controls, but that's something which pragmatically looks like, and in the case of IMF or World Bank, they also dictate their policies if we look at minutely, and that's the imbalance created by the global north and in institutions and the global south, and now China's investment would definitely create the same kind of imbalance. If you may you may bring in the analogy of the colonization, that also seems to be true in a way that you are no longer, you have to sort of accommodate the policies or the interest of your lender, and that's something needs to be addressed from both the sides. And then there's this China buying a lot of land in Pakistan. I think we need more evidence for this claim. As of now, it's like a project investment. maybe it's, there are so many things which are not clear because the data is not available. And then, yeah, I mean, on this particular point, we need more information on or evidence to sort of substantiate the answer. I hope I was clear on this question.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, please.
It was basically my question that as China is investing so much in the Gwadar port, and the China is moving into Pakistan, like buying lands, don't you think that the Pakistani government should ban the buying of lands of in Pakistan? That China local come in Gwadar and buying lands and marriage to Pakistani women. Don't you think that should be banned for Pakistan's security?
See, that's the thing. When the two sides are cooperating in good faith, like the cooperation is all encompassing. It's economic and it's cultural. So Pakistan has this since 1947, and then again China 49. So Pakistan has this very strong cordial relationship with China. So
it is good for now, but afterwards, like after some time, don't you think that it would be difficult for Pakistan to control the expansion of China in Pakistan? Don't you think that would be difficult afterwards for Pakistan?
We cannot, as in we'll have to see more documents that how the terms and conditions of those projects work, and then how much control Pakistani side is ceding to the other side. We'll have to look at that. But then again, going back to the same idea that when the cooperation starts to develop, this is more like not under suspicions. It's more under good faith and sort of mutual understanding and mutual sort of, sense of, friendship. Yeah. So under that culture, under that meta narrative, this thing is happening currently in Pakistan. So in the economic sphere, if the projects are being rolled out, in the cultural sphere, these intermarriages are happening, the student exchanges are happening, Chinese cultural days are being celebrated. So there's like a whole sort of menu of activities. It's like a kind of a change of, so the entire change of environment is taking place. And it's happening in good faith. Yes, Pakistan wants to develop, as the China has unprecedentedly developed itself, and it's like a marvelous kind of development in terms of infrastructure. So Pakistan wants to leverage on that and wants to benefit that, which is fine. Like the successive governments think that through infrastructure development they can, attain prosperity. So I think that's fine for both the sides. Then there's from Chandra, China has sent a naval ship and other military assets to safeguard investment if the port is in Pakistan and ships are docked in Pakistan.
Okay, so we are running out of time. We thank you for coming here today, says Asif, and thank you for all the participants for being here.
I hope I was clear on the answers. I'm sorry for all the glitches. I'm sorry for something that went like unclear to you guys. And thank you very much for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Asif, for that interesting presentation. I'm sorry we have to stop, but I do have another session about to start now.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.